Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining this session. Talking about agents and agentic AI in the B2B GTM world. Um, Thanks for spending a part of your day in this very critical topic where we are seeing agents and agentic AI reshaping not just the B2B GTM tech stack, but also the GTM motions, right? And how agentic AI can help reimagine the B2B GTM motions. I'm Dipinder Singh Dhingra. I'm the founder of RevSure.ai, and I'll be co-hosting this session. A quick brief about RevSure. We are a full funnel AI system of action, helping B2B GTM teams, especially with complex GTM motions, drive better ROI, pipeline predictability, and bringing back predictability into the overall revenue generation for B2B companies. I'm thrilled to be joined by Sam Malikarjun, who's the general manager at agent.ai and who's at the center of this agentic AI movement for business professionals. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Sam, if I could request you to give a brief introduction about yourself and your personal journey, and then also how agent.ai has been thinking about this whole space of agents and agentic AI and your latest thinking and findings in that world.
Yeah, so as Deepinder said, my name is Sam Malikarjunan. I was early on the team at HubSpot back in the day. We were like 150 people back then. I was the head of growth at HubSpot Labs. I got to teach advanced marketing at Harvard University and some other places. Held other roles after that, but last year, Dharmesh, who founded HubSpot, also founded Agent.ai. And so he reached out to see whether or not we could create the world's first professional network for AI agents. So think about like LinkedIn or something like that, but for the ability to create AI agents to do stuff for you. And it's been interesting. We've got, I think, almost 40,000 agents have been built on the site so far. Most of them just for people building for themselves. Over 2 million people have signed up for the site. So it's been an interesting ride.
No, that's great. Great journey, Sam. And I'm personally a user of agent.ai and I'm a fan of the work that you guys are doing, especially in driving adoption and familiarity around how to use agents in the first place and what do agents mean. And that's really going to be the topic of our session today and how other people can think about using agents in the B2B GTM world. So very quickly, I wanted to start this discussion with talking about why traditional tools and traditional automation hasn't worked. And we're going to be talking about very specifically in the B2B GTM motion, because that's where, our domain and our scope lies. If you think about the past few years, there's really been an explosion of tools, right, across the B2B GTM funnel. Right from, if you think about from left to right, if you think about the end-to-end buyer journey or the funnel, right from visitors to leads, if you have a lead-based motion or a account-based motion, right? Driving to marketing qualified accounts, sales qualified, trial signups, the PLG motion, opportunities, finally winning the customer, and then driving the expansion churn motion. Over the past few years, there's been an explosion of tools that are really get towards optimizing certain aspects of this funnel. And I think we can safely say that most sales and marketing teams are not short of tools. What they are short of is time, right? Because despite the presence of so many tools, and this is just illustrative, each of these tools actually is great in and of itself and does a great job in optimizing different aspects of the funnel. Yet the B2B GTM efficiency is at an all-time low. And so as we started going into the space, we found that we were wondering why this B2B GTM efficiency is low. And obviously, there are aspects around how the GTM motion complexity is increasing, inbound, outbound, product-led, marketing-led, dark social, dark funnel, etc. But there's something that is missing in this overall ecosystem. And that was the initiation for us to think about what's really happening in this space. Sam, any thought process on the tool sprawl that you see? I'm sure you've used many of these tools, which are very good within themselves, but still there seems to be some gaps. Just wondering what you're seeing out there. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple things are interesting about this. Like when you look at these kinds of landscapes, I remember, back in 2011, there were like 150 companies in the MarTech SaaS space. Now
Yeah.
there's well over like 12,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
So you hit that nail on the head. The tools we need exist.
Hmm.
The coordination of the tools, the ability to like get them to work together, finding the right tool, like making a choice about a CRM was easy, 15 years ago. Now there's, specialist CRMs, et cetera. So one, there's just a lot of tools and it
Yeah.
becomes hard to use, like you said. But then two, like because all of these tools enable you to do specialist work, it's just become so competitive, right? So
Hmm.
it's marketing's become a game of millimeters on the internet, where it's like, can we just get slightly more optimization out of our funnel than our competitors have? So it's a lot to manage, and the yield has gotten like decreasing over time. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of evolves.
Yeah. And that's the theme that we are seeing as well. And so what our perspective was that traditional apps and traditional automation um, is no longer enough, because what's happening, like we talked about, this tool and this data overload, because each of these tools has its source of truth and a system of record. But also what's happening is the promise of co-pilots and dashboards has still not kind of helped GTM teams drive more and more efficiency and drive more intelligent automation rather than a rules-based automation approach, right? And so there are execution gaps. And that's where I feel, and we feel, that agentic AI comes in, right? Because it's all about the promise of continuous context-aware action, right? So as you go towards filling the gaps in your buyer journeys, it's not about the tool set, it's more about how do you fill the gaps in your buyer journeys? How do you automate more and more of that? How do you make that more intelligent, more context aware, more real time? And that's where agentic AI and agents really, could fill that gap, right? And so our perspective is, agents and agentic AI, right? Agents are stuff that we've all heard about, like, something that can plan, decide, and act. They can reason. So they're intelligent, more intelligent than rules, because rules-based automation has existed for a long while. And that can help you really scale all of the activities that you're trying to do and the orchestration of the buyer journey. Again, it's important to call out, we feel, what's important for orchestrating the buyer journey, nurturing the buyer, attracting buyers into your funnel, nurturing the buyer through the multiple motions. It's not just about the marketing motion or the SDR BDR motion or the sales motion. How do you scale campaigns, but also how do you scale pipeline generation activities, demand generation activities, pipeline acceleration, so they can get the key benefits. So, Sam, in your perspective, how are you seeing agents? Like, what do you at agent.ai define as agents? Is this definition that we've put out there, which is a pretty popular definition, nothing proprietary to us? Are you seeing agents, being created in that way? And how do you see the differentiation between agent and agentic AI, if there is any? Yeah.
Yeah, so I try and remind people, because we throw around these terms like agentic and such, and they're useful to help us understand things. But the history of human interaction with computers has just been a spectrum of trust, right? So we didn't used to let them do anything. Then we let them start analyzing things, machine learning, the analytics, et cetera, that kind of stuff. And people are familiar with things like autocomplete. Like generative AI is functionally the same concept. The technical execution is different. But instead of guessing the next word or trying to guess the rest of the sentence that the user is writing, it's guessing entire paragraphs and entire books, or it's able to actually create stuff. And that is so now we've gone from not letting it take any action on its own unless it was predefined, like you said, like being able to say, like, if this, then do this. That's not really AI. That's just, automating tasks that you've done. To now we're letting it take increasing amounts of trust to let it take actions on its own. So
Mm.
it can send emails, it can generate reports on its own, and we're learning to trust it more and more over time. I generally see the agents that people build fall into kind of two buckets. One is either efficiency, so automate the things I'm already doing, or and that's kind of the obvious way. It's where everybody kind of started. The other way is new capabilities. So some of those new capabilities are just things that I would normally have to ask a coworker for. So sales reps can now design their own, slide decks. Marketers can write their own code, that kind of stuff. So that we're all still T-shaped. We still have our area of specialization, but we're able to be mediocre at a lot more things than we used to be. Right. So I'm not a great coder, but I can do a lot without having to actually bother the engineering team. And then the third category is capabilities that you didn't that no one has had before. So my favorite example for this is things like a synthetic audience, being able to create a synthetic representation of your target audience. I do this when I'm speaking at conferences and testing your messaging against that. That's an example of kind of like a net new capability that we didn't have before. So I think a lot of people get stuck on the first bucket, which is automation, efficiency, things like that. And that's very important, but that's kind of table stakes at this point. What's more interesting is what can your team do when the skills that they have access to a lot more skills that normally exist and also access to skills that previously didn't exist at all.
Got it. Got it. Very interesting. So use it for automation, which is a no-brainer. Use it for new capabilities for existing stakeholders. And then third is kind of try completely new capabilities that one thought you could not do by creating more synthetic data or synthetic audiences, etc. And I love the autocomplete metaphor because it's really about, it seems that there's a continuum in the way that people think about agents. So there's automation, new capabilities, and completely new areas to kind of explore. But it kind of starts from how much is driven by human and how much is completed by the AI, right? And so are you seeing that this spectrum, like I said, it starts with 10% human and 90% AI. Are you seeing a spectrum in the agents that your users, I know you guys are, almost like a million users or million signups, so congratulations on that, or maybe more. You probably have the latest.
2 million,
Um,
2 million signups. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, amazing. So are you seeing that continuum kind of moving towards, or is it dependent on the area? Like, does it go from 10% human, rest agent in certain areas, or are you seeing it's more and more driven by the agent, the
It's very
task?
much driven again as we think about this as a continuum of trust. How much do we trust computers
Yeah,
to do things? A lot of that comes down to how important is the thing we're asking it to do. So it generating an audio overview of the day's news for me, if it messes that up, if it hallucinates something, like that's not terribly important.
right.
If it's going to send an email to like 8 million people or start sending emails out to like 2 million users, that is something that you want to check in greater depth. So it's the complexity of the task, but also like how important is it that the task is executed properly. So I usually describe it as an intern, right? It's a very smart intern. AI is a very smart intern, like fresh out of MIT, Sloan, or whatever. But
Mhm.
if you wouldn't let an intern do it without checking their work, you shouldn't let the AI do it yet without checking their work. So you might let it do like some basic analysis or something. It doesn't really matter, um, or that you at least have a high confidence that it can do on its own. But if you wouldn't, let it send, a final report or something to your board of directors, if you wouldn't let the intern do that without you checking its work, you should check the AI's work. So a lot of this is an accelerant, but still, again, it's that spectrum of trust.
Got it. No, I love it. I think the spectrum of trust way of thinking is very important, especially as we start thinking about using it within enterprises and within, let's say, in our case, the B2B context with our prospects and customers. And as many people are thinking about using it, I think how much you can trust the agent or the agentic AI to help you complete with accuracy and with precision becomes very important. So what we've just laid down here is like if someone wanted to get started on an agentic AI initiative for their business, for their enterprise, not just as an individual user, but something that will impact their GTM motion, how does one think about doing it, right? And I think what we've put here is a framework that says, okay, there's a crawl, walk, run framework. Choose one GTM workflow to automate. It could be, and again, it's not automate in the rules-based automation sense, but choose one GTM workflow to make it better, improved efficiency, effectiveness, and speed using agents, right? So it could be around lead routing, or it could be around campaign optimization. We are seeing, for example, in a lot of the enterprise that we work with, there are a lot of cross-channel workflows that happen because 70% of the B2B GTM motion within an enterprise is cross-channel. It's not just warm inbound prospecting or cold outbound or warm outbound. That one workflow, it's like, okay, how do I can orchestrate that warm outbound with an email reach out, with a LinkedIn, campaign, with an ABM campaign, etc. So choose that one workflow. Obviously you want to define the success criteria, And then this one comes back to Sam, to your point around trust, right? So you want a trusted AI platform to be able to help you execute and build that agent, right? And then obviously you want to iterate and expand those use cases. So within this cycle, where do you feel that, in your experience, where do we feel that enterprises might falter more than in one of these steps or two of these steps compared to others, right? Is it in the defining the success criteria, being having realistic expectations, or is it on the platform side? Like, what is your experience on that?
It's very much about the expectations, because we have to shift the way we think about tools and technology versus and bring in some skills from elsewhere. So,
Mhm.
for example, I described it as being kind of like an intern. Anybody who's not a first-time manager knows that bringing an intern onto your team creates more work in the near term, not less, because you have to teach it and train it. And I see a lot of, especially in the enterprise, people fall into kind of two buckets with AI. Either they're overwhelmed and intimidated by it because they don't understand it, they don't know where to get started, which is why I like just start with one thing, start simple, and then expand from there. Or they're frustrated that AI isn't already like a magical thing that can do everything for them. Like the truth is in reality somewhere in the middle. And much like an intern or junior person on your team, it's about, can you give it a focused context? So an AI is not going to be good at everything, at least not yet. That's The world
Yeah.
changes in a world in which AI is good at everything. The more focused you make it, the better it's going to be. Giving it definitions of success, because otherwise it doesn't know when to look at what it just did and understand like can I improve over time. That is, we always say if somebody on your team is not successful, you either hired the wrong person or you managed the right person the wrong way. Right? Managers and employees, we have a mutual obligation to each other. It's very much the same thing with AI. So if your AI is not successful, you either selected the wrong tool or built the wrong tool or gave it, or more likely, you managed the right person the wrong way. So you just didn't give it clear enough instructions, access to the tools that it needs, the context that it needs, and have like reasonable expectations of what it can and can't do. So it's very much about how do we take some of the lessons we have from kind of managing and developing junior employees and that mindset that we have, and applying that to what we used to think of as tools, but now it's tools with more of a kind of, well, a literal agency, like autonomy to go do stuff. But don't be disappointed when AI can't immediately do everything that you want, because it's usually more a case that you haven't given it good enough instructions, context, defined a goal for it to know when it's doing well. That's the biggest key when it comes to actually deploying this stuff.
Got it. Got it. I love these two examples and analogies that you use, the intern, like, how much can you trust in whether you're kind of either you've not set the right expectations or you've not hired the right intern or you've not set the right description for that intern to execute on. So I love that analogy and also the autocomplete analogy, right? Now, obviously, obviously since we are tech companies, right, there is a lot of focus on the right AI platform, right? Um, what we found as we start talking to our prospects and customers is that what's important is not just to think about one agent. Obviously, when you start, you want to start with one GTM workflow or one GTM use case. But it's also important to have a vision where you're not just thinking about one or two agents, but you have a way to build multiple agents, because especially in the B2B GTM context, in the enterprise, you want to be able to build agents for every region, channel, segment, of your motion, right? Especially if you're serving multiple segments, multiple regions, multiple channels, using multiple channels. So an agent, it's not just about hiring an agent, but also hiring the factory that builds the agent, right? And I know agent.ai focuses a lot on that, right? It's an agent builder environment and an agent network. So what got you started, what got agent.ai started in thinking about more from a platform perspective rather than just having a set of agents? Because you need both, right? But what got you started on the platform journey? Yeah.
Yeah, so again, because agents are so much more effective when they're customized, we knew early on that it wasn't going to be like it was in the SaaS space where we build a tool for you, you use that tool, and then other people build more tools over time. You're going to have to customize it yourself. So again, feed it context, those custom instructions, etc. So we knew that we needed to give people the ability to make their own AI agents the way that they want them to. Like you can have templates as a starting point or something like that, but even if it's just a sales outreach AI, which is pretty straightforward to do, you're probably not going to use someone else's and have it be as successful. So we knew that people would need to be able to create and customize their own agents, which again is the majority of what we see. The almost 40,000 agents on the site, only like 1,600 are public. So the vast majority of people are building agents and using them for themselves. But then again, because the more focused an AI agent is, the more effective it is. It generally means you're not going to have just one agent, just like you would with a team, right? Like somebody does something, that work gets then passed off to somebody else, gets passed off to somebody else. And as a manager, you're kind of coordinating and orchestrating that team. And it's very much the same way with AI agents. So you and I might have a team. Almost nobody has the same team, right? Because I'll have maybe one agent that's different, or an agent that I had to take and customize for my own thing. And then it's, what agents do you use? What data do you feed them? That's what's going to determine whether or not your team of agents, or in this case, you, right? Because you are your team of agents, whether or not you're successful is, do you have the right players on your team? And it's not one, right? Just like sports. There's not, one player might matter a lot, but one player doesn't win an entire game in football or soccer or anything like that. It's the same way with AI agents. Is like, can you, one, be able to build your own and customize your own AI agents, because it's not going to be perfect if you try and use somebody else's. But then two, it really is, you can have great ingredients, but you need a recipe for everything working together. And that's where the AI orchestration comes in. So you have more than one agent on your team for any given task you're trying to accomplish.
Got it. No, absolutely. And that's what we're finding, especially as people are starting to embark on this journey, and there'll be a lot of rapid experimentation. The ability to customize and bring together the right ingredients and your team of agents becomes really important. So I'm glad you touched on that, Sam. And that's really been our approach at RevSure, right? Since we are building this full funnel AI system of action, right? We are very much in the camp of being able to provide a platform through which you can build a team of agents, right? On one core brain, which is the data that you talked about, because the AI, an AI agent is only as good as the context of the data that you provided, right? So the perspective that we've taken, and the perspective that we were inspired by a lot through the interactions with you and your team, was really about how do you build an environment that is a team of agents on a platform that provides flexibility, so you can customize those agents, and also the ability to coordinate among those agents, right? That's what the team means. So which then drives ultimately the benefits, right? That you want to you probably want to seek from your GTM, initiative, right? Whether that's any part of the funnel, right? And this also allows better coordination, we feel, across the traditional, we talk about how sales and marketing collaboration is broken, but the opportunity is to now improve the collaboration across the sales marketing motion, the SDR BDR motion, and the sales motion, right? And that's the team of agents, and that's the promise of where this agents and this agentic AI can take us, right? Before I move on, I'd like to, encourage the audience and the attendees to put their questions in the question panel, and we'll be taking questions shortly in about 5 minutes from now. So, and then what becomes important is also the underlying platform architecture that you put in place. It became important for us to think through this platform architecture, especially because we were working with enterprises, and security, privacy become very important. So that drove a lot of our choices. But if you want to take a step back, and if you want to think about an agent building platform, not just a specific agent that you want to invest in or you want to kind of hire, right? It's about having the right orchestration at the top, right? So being able to orchestrate the agent workflows and the agentic AI workflows. It's about putting the right tools that you need for orchestration, right? So there's the ability to kind of orchestrate across tools in your GTM motion, and this is just illustrative, right? So you want to use some orchestration layer like a line graph or a line graph to help you do that. Obviously, authentication security becomes important. There's the tools that you want to kind of be able to orchestrate across the GTM tech stack. So you need to kind of have the right tooling that the agents kind of interact with. The agents themselves require a very important data layer. So you want to be able to feed data from across your GTM motion, whether that's data sitting in your CRM systems, whether data sitting in your marketing automation systems, your sales automation outreach tools, your paid ad systems, etc. How do you bring that data together that can feed the agents so that the agents can take intelligent action based on reasoning? And then there's this whole aspect of memory, because the better the memory that the agents has, either based on the user interactions or based on context of, let's say, the lead. What's been the lead's journey? What's been the account's journey? What's been the opportunities journey? What interactions has have happened in the journey of the buyer, right? That can be fed as memory and can be maintained as memory, which improves the context. Because very often we find that, hey, you're doing a sales outreach without having full context of what the buyer interacted with earlier, right, in the funnel. Whether they attend a trade show, did they go to a conference, did they interact with a webinar, right? Did they, see some campaign? Did they have a demo request, etc.? So a lot of actions that we find in the GTM in motion are taken without having the full context, which is the memory. And obviously, then you have the ability to orchestrate and have this in a secure environment. So this is just one example of a platform architecture that obviously RevSure is adopting. Any thoughts here, like in your own platform architecture at agent.ai? Any thoughts, that any principles, conceptual, not necessarily technical details, that you guys had to kind of think through as you were building this whole agent network for business professionals? Sam?
Yeah, there's two. One, I'm glad you brought up the memory component because,
Yeah,
again, in terms of setting reasonable expectations, when you first
yeah,
start out, no matter how good the AI agent is that you've built, it's not going to be that good until it learns more and more about you, because there's no way to define in advance everything that it needs to know. So that
yeah.
memory, if you're designing it right, the AI should get smarter over time, just like a real person, right? So you and I have known each other for roughly a year,
Yeah.
Deepinder, right? You could probably guess what I'm going to say next, or something like that. As opposed to
Mhm.
my wife, we've been together 16 years. She can literally give some of my speeches on her own just because she's like heard them so many times. And so
Mhm.
like the more you kind of build up that memory, the better interaction you're going to have. But then the other thing is, like, I like these. It's not just a stack, it is showing the flow. This is stuff that
Mhm.
we're familiar with, again, right? This is just, if you think about how you design processes for people on teams of people, it's just now, it's not always a person who has to be involved in taking that, step, doing something with that step, and then handing it off to kind of the next person in line. I do think the data component is probably one of the biggest challenges. So how, especially with enterprise level data, um, how can you have secure sharing of AI information and data? So when we were building a pilot project at HubSpot, we analyzed 300,000 hours of recorded sales calls to try and
Yeah.
understand how conversations evolve for different people in the question and answer pairs in a sequence, et cetera. That's pretty sensitive data, right? It's private data that people have a reasonable expectation should be kept private. Um,
Mhm.
and it was privacy was a challenge enough when we were trying to protect things like 16-digit credit card numbers. Right, like think about how much security has gone into making it secure for us to exchange 16 digits across the internet. But now we're talking about much more complex things that are kind of harder to secure. So I think that for anybody who's thinking about deploying this, if it's going to be successful, it needs context and data. And you should think through that security element of it, because that's not something you want to just, throw out into the universe and kind of see how it goes.
Absolutely. So memory, context, data, and security, very important, right? In this whole, obviously there's this architecture, but the whole workflow, the things become very critical. So that's been our thought process and our journey as well. And where we are going with this, Sam, is that we're building this team of agents on top of the platform. So I like to think about this as, you want to solve these specific problems and use cases, but you also need the art of problem solving below it. You need the platform below it. So the way, we've tried to kind of orchestrate this, and we are seeing, a lot of customers also think, okay, there's this whole area of, if you want to think about agents for helping you optimize marketing, agents to help you accelerate pipeline through the middle of the funnel, and agents that drive better revenue predictability. And these are just illustrative agents. Obviously, these are agents that we have, but these are just a few examples, right? Because you can then build more and more agents that then can also coordinate with each other, because your attribution agent can then coordinate with how you want to reallocate spend, as an example, right? So that's been our approach. I want to just quickly show, just for the benefit of our attendees here, just quickly show the approach that we've taken, especially around these agents and the agent building environment as a sneak peek. I would love your comments on it as well as we go along here. Um, so very quickly, I think wanted to take you through how RevSure thinks about the agent building environment and the agents that you can build, right? The first thing is integrating data, right? So like we all talked about, and we just talked about getting the right data into the context for the agents is important. In this case, I'm showing you RevSure's instance. So we use 11 tools across our GTM tech stack. So this we use RevSure and RevSure, eating our own dog food, right? So, here, one of the key challenges that we find is if you want agentic AI to work and the agents to be effective, you want to be able to give agents full context across all of the data that you have in your GTM tech stack. So here we've integrated HubSpot, Salesforce, G2, Sendoso, our paid ad systems. We are de-anonymizing visitors on the website, etc. All of this data is getting ingested, integrated, and then feeds a data model or a data hub that harmonizes data across the multiple systems, right? So lead contact data getting harmonized from those relevant sources, campaigns getting harmonized, etc. Each of this is a very important step we've found because especially when you have scattered and disparate data systems, being able to integrate data across all of these systems and harmonize, dedupe it, create the linkages becomes very important. Once we have this data, then we can now start feeding this as context into the data environment, right? So skipping a few steps, right? Just because this is a sneak peek, right? Here's our agent portal that then allows you to build multiple agents at different stages of the funnel, right? Agents to prioritize accounts, agents to an SDR agent that you can build. You can build an agent for sending personalized outreach emails. You can build an agent for contact enrichment. You can build an agent for prioritizing opportunities, etc., etc. Now, because you can build these multiple agents, because you have the ability, you've brought in all of the data and all of the context, and each of these agents could be working at different stages of the funnel. So if I were to go into one of these agents, right, which is the SDR agent, right, this agent has been defined through this workflow of the agent builder environment, right? It takes a user input. This is an SDR agent. If I went back, um, right, that I'm showing you, that agent that I showed you in the portal, that's how it gets built. There's a whole agent workflow environment that you can drag and drop. But what's important, you have the ability to access the right tools, use AI, run processes, define your write backs, define your output formats, whether it's going to run auto schedule. You can put intelligent logic in any of these agents. For example, if you wanted to say, hey, I want to kind of run an agent to, for leads with inbound demo requests in the past 2 days, but only if they fall in the ICP, only if they fall in our ICP, right? You can kind of put this logic very quickly, right? You don't have to write rules. It kind of takes user input and then it kind of knows what to do from there, right? And it's given data from, because it has all of access to all of the data, all of the memory from the leads, accounts, opportunities, etc., that we've harmonized across the multiple systems, right? And this agent building environment, you can add more building blocks to this. You can reduce building blocks, etc. And then what this allows you to do is build this, have a capability to build multiple agents on a secure platform and a secure infrastructure with the right data, context, and memory. So that's our approach. And I know we've been inspired a lot by what you guys have been doing at agent.ai. Sam, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think when people see a builder like this, and they get underwhelmed, I think in a good way,
Mhm.
because when you say build an AI agent, that sounds so intimidating. But when you think about it as defining a series of steps, and the difference
Mm.
between this and a regular workflow automation is that the input is not standardized, the instructions aren't necessarily always literal and specific, and the
Yeah.
output isn't necessarily standardized. like if you were building an email automation thing, the only thing that's maybe changing is like the first name, right? You put the first name token kind of in the email.
Yeah.
So you can think methodically, think logically. You can generally build these agents and be quite successful with them. It's it's still very much, again, like if you were hiring a new employee, like an actual human on your team, you would tell them what to do. Now you don't have to tell them every time what to do, and they can do things that you didn't tell them specifically, like do this, right, etc. That's the difference between just regular instruction, like automation and this kind of stuff. But it is
Mhm.
still about the quality of the instructions that you give it, the quality of the tools and the data that you give it, and again, just like the clarity, right? So I never again want to have a head of sales ask me like, what was our revenue pipeline at the beginning of the quarter? Because that's
Mhm.
a little bit of a hard question to solve, answer, right? Because revenue has different definitions depending on your business model, where the revenue is. Is it forecasted? Is it signed? Is it closed? Is it actually billed? Is it recognized?
Yeah.
And what a person knows to do that AI doesn't yet is to ask those clarifying questions of like, which definition of revenue do you want to use for that kind of thing? So thinking through that stuff as you're designing these agents is going to be the key to whether or not they're successful. And again, giving it access to the tools so that it's not making things up, right? If it didn't have access to kind of this deterministic database layer that Deepender's showing you all, it would
Mhm.
just hallucinate. It would just make stuff up, right? But by giving it access to the specific data that you want it to use, you have more control over it. And so when people are like, "Oh, why don't I just go to chatgpt.com?" ChatGPT is great. Don't get me wrong. You need to, brainstorm a recipe or something like that. It's fantastic. But because it doesn't have that specific context of your data and your systems and your tools, it's never going to be as effective as something that you kind of customize. So again, just think about it the same way. If you were onboarding a new employee, you would give them instructions. You would tell them what tools are used for what purpose. It's the same thing when you're building these agents.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for paraphrasing and summarizing that so effectively, Sam. So now we'll move on to the Q&A section. I think there are a few questions for you, Sam. So how does agentic agent building handle testing and validation before deploying agents live?
Yeah, that's another interesting thing.
Yeah,
Because what it's producing is not standardized, testing is slightly harder, much like with a real person.
yeah,
So one, you can build agents whose only job is to test agents. We do have that.
yeah,
Like, maybe it's a sales email thing, and then you just create another agent and say, you're our ICP. Does this sales email make sense to you? So you can build in some of those checks, almost like quality
yeah,
control. Um, but you should definitely test it, but it is going to be an iterative process. It's not like normal software deployment where like it's a binary value of works or doesn't, right? It either did the thing you coded it to do or not. It will sometimes do things in a better way. So, and again, because it's going to improve over time as it learns based on the success criteria that you defined, feeding that back into the model so it can learn. It's not a binary value of this is now ready for deployment. And that's
yeah,
another very good reason to start small and then iterate over time, is because you can test a specific use case, like draft this email, summarize this, analyze this data, something like that. You can check those basic actions manually for a while, but as it grows in complexity, it's going to have to learn over time. So you definitely want to test. The only caveat that I'm giving everybody is it's not a one and done test. It's constant, like ongoing supervision as it learns and gets better, but also like again, it's AI. So it's not always going to be the same input and the same output. So you want to check that on an ongoing basis.
absolutely. And I think the one thing that you pointed out, because the output of the agent is not a deterministic, you have data and context that's deterministic, but the output of the agent is not deterministic. So putting a testing framework that tests the output becomes tough. And I think there's more work that needs to be done around how do you test the output and sanity checks, etc. From a RevSure perspective, we do add like a test mode. So instead of deploying the agent, you can have run it in test mode and see the outputs and review them manually. But I think there's more work to be done around testing of agents, and I think there's research R&D work around how do you test agents more effectively out there. Um, uh, I have a quick question. We have a question for RevShow. How do RevShow's agents interact with our existing tech stack, like SFDC, HubSpot, or LinkedIn? So, in two ways. First is input data. So what we do at RevSure, since we harmonize data across, let's say, Salesforce and HubSpot and LinkedIn, etc., your CRM map, your paid ad system, etc. So we all of the data gets harmonized that can be input to the agent. So that's one way. And the second way is that when you want to take action, these are like tools, right? So if you want to write back to the CRM, or you want to write a workflow, you want to run a workflow through HubSpot, or you want to refine a campaign in LinkedIn. So the output of the agent drives the action based on the agent's reasoning logic. So there are two ways in which RevSure's agents interact with these systems. There's an interesting question, Sam. I think you'd be great to take this. Differentiate between agents that are monitoring actions and results versus agents that are taking actions, right? And so, how do we schedule monitor? But I think I think the main question is how do you differentiate between agents that are monitoring versus agents that are taking actions? Yeah,
Yeah. Letting computers monitor things is something we've done for a long time.
yeah,
And it's useful in kind of the modern era of generative AI simply because we can now ask AI to monitor more things of more complexity and give us more useful answers. So instead of having a computer that's monitoring something and it just turns a light from green to red if it's not working, the AI can actually tell you, like, this is what's not working about it so that you can go take actions. The agents that go do stuff on your behalf would be is that kind of like next step. So if something is just monitoring something, it's not really an agent or agentic because it's not doing anything, right? It's just telling
mm,
you things, informing you like any data system would, just in a different way, different types of data, different types of outputs that it can create. Now, if you then had so let's say you have a monitoring agent that looks at email click-through rates, and it says, oh, click-through rates are going down. You then have another agent that can rewrite the copy in the email and actually take action based on that information. That is
yeah,
it having agency to go do that. And now if you were really brave, you would let it automatically go send those emails and like test and refine and learn on an ongoing basis. In reality, you'll probably want to check it first. But yeah,
mhm,
monitoring it has improved because you can also ask it natural language questions. People creating
mm.
dashboards and stuff like that, like definitely a skill as opposed to asking questions. But I think the more interesting thing is then with that data, with that information, what action do you want taken on your behalf? And that's where the agents become more useful than just a monitoring dashboard.
Got it. No, completely appreciate that. One thing that we're also seeing in the monitoring space is how do you monitor the agents themselves? Right? So can you kind of, as the agents are taking action, right? You want a way to kind of monitor. It's not an agent, but monitoring of agents, right? So agent effectiveness and agent monitoring is a key thing that is also then we're being asked for, and like can you keep an audit trail of all of the agent's actions when it took that action, why it took that action, right? So that's another area of monitoring that becomes interesting in the agentic AI world. So that's what I'm saying. Um,
Yeah, for
uh,
people who
the,
have gone through management training, we all know that after an employee does something
yeah,
poorly, or they mess up something up, you can ask them,
yeah,
like, explain to me, like, why you made this decision, or like talk me through how you were thinking about this. That's the right way, not just yelling at people. It's very
yeah,
much the same thing with AI, right? Like, where in
yeah,
the very complex process did it go wrong and why did it go wrong? That's the important thing to figure out if you want to actually improve it.
got it. Yeah, agreed. And one of the things that we've been thinking about just on this topic, because it's a very interesting topic, is an agent in the GTM context. Let's say you have an agent that's running a personalized outreach or an SDR agent. What's the effectiveness of that agent, right? How do you monitor, not just monitoring why it took the decisions, but how effective was that agent in driving pipeline and driving revenue? So there's agent attribution, like agent, attributing an agent's effectiveness also becomes important, because it's if that agent is replacing, let's say, an SDR, you have to kind of monitor that SDR's effectiveness, or simply you have to monitor that agent's effectiveness towards your business outcome. And that's a very interesting area as well, in terms of agentic AI in the GTM motion. So
Yeah,
we'll
the
take one
more
last
junior
question.
an employee
Yeah,
is, the more
yeah,
basic you want to make their definitions of success, right? Like an SDR, you're
yeah,
probably judging them just on how many calls they make per day and how many appointments they book, right? It's
yeah,
very easy coin operated.
yeah,
Same thing for an AI agent, right? Like the more clear you can make the definition of success, the more likely it is to be
yeah.
successful. and the easier it'll be to train itself on an ongoing basis. It'll be like, I did I did bad there, or I
Yeah,
did good there, and then it can figure out and improve that over time. Vague definitions of success require experience, and AI does not have wisdom yet.
I completely agree. Completely agree. One last question for, I think it's from a RevSure context, but how frequently do the agents update or improve based on new data or changes in strategy in the RevSure Agent Hub? So the data and the context of the agents are updated on a daily basis, right? So because you want it to kind of get the latest context and the full context with the memory, as well as the latest context, and how and therefore the agents also improve their outputs and their actions on a daily basis because it's dynamic to the latest context that's given, and so the decisions that the agents make is dynamic to that. So it's kind of feeding off the latest information as much as possible, which in most cases is daily for us. You can also do it intraday, but in RevShore's context, we mostly do it daily. Yeah. Great. So that was, I think that was most of the questions that we got. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Sam for this great insights. I know you guys have been on this journey for over a year now, and thanks and congratulations on the success. We are very excited about what agentic AI can do for specifically for the B2B GTM motion, especially for enterprises which have complex GTM motions, because that's where simple agents don't work, and that's where you need more of an agent building platform that can customize for every region channel function. Again, so thanks for joining, Sam, and thanks everyone for taking time. We'll be sending a summary of this post this session, and if you have any questions for Sam, you can reach out to him. We'll send the contact. Obviously, you can go check out agent.ai website. If you have any questions for RevSure, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be sending you the contact information. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.